All right, so today we talk about friction. Friction is the force that keeps us all in place. It's kind of a big deal. Without friction, there is no motion. Without friction, nothing stays together. So we have to understand that friction is probably our most important force that we have. So frictional force occurs anytime between two objects. So basically, friction always opposes motion. So, but it's impossible to have motion without friction, at least to start. Friction always pushes opposite of the motion. So when you are walking, think about pushing off with your foot. You can't push off with your foot without friction. Friction has to be able to be there for you to be able to move. Now, friction also slows down an object. So in order for you to brake, for your brakes to work, brakes work through friction. Now, the ability to stay on the road, that is friction as well. Uh, Now, when we talk about friction, we're talking about basically the connection between surfaces. So no surface is perfectly smooth. If a perfectly smooth surface would be impossible to exist based on the fact that friction is held together, or friction holds together the atoms in the object to work. Now, the microscopic view shows that every surface has tiny ridges and bumps. So even on a very smooth floor, you still have those bumps. Now, it is possible to smooth out those bumps as well. So you can sand something to make them even, to make it more smooth, to make it less likely to have something in it. You wax a floor. That wax is there to close those surfaces. You can, when there's ice has much uh, fewer of these imperfections or these, so that it fills those holes. It has less. That's the reason why you slip on ice. That's the reason why you need a skate to be able to get through that, to create that friction between ice and skate. Now, so this is why objects interact. So when they touch, they actually are connecting, and they're basically interconnecting one another. So friction is defined as the force that occurs anytime between two objects and opposes motion. So the reason why you are able to sit on whatever you're sitting on right now is because of friction. It allows you to stay in one place. It allows the connection between your whatever you're sitting on and your body to stay in that place. There's a lot of things that would not work without. Sorry. There's a lot of things that would not work without force of friction. You wouldn't be able to walk. You would always fall back. So when you push, the floor pushes in the opposite direction to be able to make you move. Without that pushing, you are unable to get what you are unable to move the way that you normally do. Think about how for reaction there is an equal and opposite reaction. The friction basically defines Newton's third law because friction is that equal reaction from what you are doing. So elastic doesn't work uh, without friction. So think about how it keeps your hair in place. If it without that, it just slides right off. You have nothing to connect between that rubber band and your hair. Knots don't work. So knots and ties do not work without it. They have to connect with friction. They connect with each other. So without friction, no matter how hard you tried to tie a knot, nothing would work. Erasers and pencils do not work without friction. So if you ever noticed when you erase or when you color in a spot how it's so much smoother, basically those erasers and those pencils are either getting rid of those microscopic ledges or they're filling in those microscopic ledges. So the graphite fills it in. That's why you can see the writing on your paper. Same thing with ink. They fill up those microscopic places. Car engines have a lot of friction happening. These gears fit into one another and move one another. Gears cannot work without the function. They won't connect to one another. They won't have those connections between one another. So thus your car wouldn't move. Your car moves on friction. It relies on friction to function. Now, too much friction can cause a problem. That's why we use oil and greasing mechanisms to make sure that there is not too much friction inside of an engine. Too much friction will cause the engine to overheat, as some people probably know. Now, brakes are completely friction. That's how brake pads work. They push against the cylinder of the wheel to slow down the vehicle. Brake systems work by applying friction to the rotating wheel to stop the thing. Clothes wouldn't work. Clothes are connected based on friction. They would fall apart. They would fall into just a hump of string. Now, same thing happens with all of these different things. Think about sandpaper. Think about the ability to scratch an itch on your arm, the ability to strike a match, how planes can actually fly. They use friction between the air to actually lift into the air. Think about this. The more an object weighs, the harder or the more friction it is going to feel. So if you slide that block of wood across a table that is smooth, it'll slide much further than a block of wood that has something sitting on it, because mass and friction work together well. There are two types of friction. There is static friction and there is kinetic friction. So static friction means that something is motionless. So like you sitting where you are right now watching this. Kinetic friction is the ability for motion to happen. So basically, static friction is going to be much greater than kinetic friction, because all kinetic friction is slowing down an object as it falls. Static friction must be much there have to be a lot more microscopic holds on static friction in order for something to remain motionless. Otherwise, you would slide where you are. Now, critical thinking. I want you to write this one on your notes. Is this man doing static friction, kinetic friction, or is it both? And I'd like to explain your answer. So basically, go back, read what you're seeing, and what you think is happening. So which one's undergoing static, which one's going kinetic, or are they both going on both, or what? So write that down in your notes. I actually, if you could make a comment at the bottom of this particular assignment and press submit, that'd be great. All right, I hope you have a great day, and that's all we have for today. See you later.